Pizza delivery drivers, what did customers do to end up on the list? Story 1. Some frat guy grabbed a female driver's butt, and we banned the whole frat. They kicked the dude out and wrote a seriously good apology to the driver, and we delivered it to them. Again, after she said she was okay with it. When I was 19, I delivered pizza for a locally owned store by the college. Not only did we deliver food, but we delivered beer. Alcohol had to be delivered with a minimum $7 food order, and whoever showed ID at the door became the responsible party, and it had to be delivered by 1:45 a.m. I received a large order from a sorority on a Saturday night to deliver with 5 pizzas and a couple of cases of beer. No one answered the front door, but I heard a bunch of voices around back, so I walked around, and it was roughly 30 girls, no males. 2 girls said to follow them into the house to show me where to put everything. They were clearly beyond drunk, and they started grabbing at me, trying to get my shirt off and grabbing my crotch after I sat everything on the kitchen table. 3 more girls came in and kissed me on my neck, grabbing my hair and messing it up. At first, I was thinking, holy crap, this is the beginning of some porno movie. And then they kept getting more aggressive, and more girls were coming in, so I got the hell out of there. Without getting paid. I got back to the store and the owner was pissed that I did not collect any money. I told him to just drop it and take it out of my pay. He ended up calling the police and it became a whole thing with the local news getting involved. It was a nightmare. This was in 1992. Once when I was 12, I was at a neighbor's house after school to hang out with my friend. Her older sister ended up having several of her friends over. What started with teasing became physical, and eventually I had to escape from being physically restrained and ran home. Around 1999. Nobody in my life took it seriously. Sorry you went through that. This story is not really connected that much, but my brain tells me what to do, so I am typing it, and I'm sorry if this is not appropriate. I went to this big party once, which I was nervous about. I literally never said no to a party and had been to hundreds, but I was an anxious wreck every single one of those times. It was all a sort of an attempt to get better that never really culminated. Anyway, this particular night I met Morris, fake name. I don't think about my sexuality. I know, though, that I almost don't see bodies. I can't fall in love with a person until I know their brains. I was really into this one dude's brains at this party, but he's deaf. We ended up sitting kind of on opposite sides of the room since it was a straight party and just kept texting each other for hours. I told him about the way that I am and how I need a mental connection and time before I can develop love. I tell him I can't move on to a physical relationship without an initial connection. He seemed to mirror my every thought, and for a while I was thinking, this guy, he is perfect for me. I move and sit down next to him. I'm ready to snuggle a dude at a public party, maybe. Almost as soon as my ass hit the couch, he dives his hand into my underwear and grabs me. I'm not shy about my reactions, so I embarrass him and storm out. Anyway, it's so weird to me that people can know what an emotional connection feels like and still prioritize something false. Story 2. I worked for a pizza place that was near a very large software company. Deliveries to the neighborhoods or offices where all the tech workers lived were usually pretty awesome because they tip rather well. But there was one apartment that started to become a concern for us drivers. The man ordering was always polite, always paid, always tipped $4, and he would have been a perfect customer. He'd order breadsticks and a salad twice a week, and sometimes he'd include a bottle of root beer. Except when he opened his door, you could see an alarming amount of our breadsticks boxes stacked everywhere inside. Not like a few of them on the counter and a couple by the trash. Stacks, and stacks of them. Even worse, it was our only boxes in there. He wasn't just ordering from us often. We were the only place he was getting food outside of work. Now, I've worked in some of those tech offices myself. I know that there are enough decent food options just hanging out in the break rooms that this guy was probably not malnourished. But the way his living space was a shrine of greasy cardboard was a clear sign that this guy didn't have a healthy relationship with our food. Our manager was a really cool dude though, and he heard the drivers joking about the boxes and asked a couple of us, "Is this like a messy guy or a guy who needs help?" We agreed it was probably the latter, so on his day off, the manager went to the guy's apartment with an envelope that had gift cards for several other restaurants that delivered in the area and chatted with him. The manager found out that the guy was an immigrant on a visa who was struggling to find American food he liked and was too socially awkward to ask anyone, so he talked with him through a few menus and helped him with some recommendations. Then he helped the guy load all of the boxes into his truck to take to the dump, in exchange for a promise not to order from us more than like once a week. For a little while, the manager had a note on the calendar showing the last time the guy had ordered, and a couple of times he had to hold his ground and refuse the guy's order. But after that chat, I never saw the stack of boxes again, and the guy would boast about the different meals that he'd had. It's not uncommon for young men to jump right into tech work and have zero idea how to take care of themselves. They make more than enough money to be able to just buy their way out of this predicament, so they never learn. But it's interesting to hear the specifics of this story. A buddy of mine had half of his spare bedroom full of dirty clothes. The building didn't have machines and the laundromat was almost impossible to get to on his schedule, so he was just buying new stuff online as the old stuff got dirty. $100 a week on clothing. 1 pair of jeans, 1 pair of shorts, 1 5-pack of t-shirts, 1 5-pack of underwear, 1 bag of socks. Was nothing on his salary. You should have seen his reaction when I explained there were services that would pick up and do his laundry for him. Hell, he could hire a maid who would wash his clothing and clean his apartment for less than what he was spending. That's hilarious because it's true. Source, have been one of these young men myself. Like, I wasn't paid that well by industry standards, but even with my ex only working part-time, it was still more than enough for the two of us to spend the majority of our 20s on a steady diet of fast food, video games, and no sleep. So that's tech life for you, baby. It was glorious. Sadly, it's not the kind of life that forces you to grow up and become responsible. You know, the kind of smaller crises that teach you how to deal with the big ones. My wife even became chronically ill and we could just go, well, luckily we can afford treatment. Back to the video games. So naturally, when the big crises finally hit us, we just sank. Thank you for sharing this. That's an aspect of tech culture I hadn't been much aware of before. This is slightly different, but your story reminded me of it. Many years ago, I worked at an electronics store that also sold CDs, DVDs, and games. The big yellow one for my Australian friends. And there was a rule that we had to ban from buying a specific CD, which at the time I thought was absolutely bizarre, but I eventually asked my manager about it and he told me that after selling it to him for what felt like the 100th time, he finally asked the guy why he kept purchasing it. This man was listening to it once, then throwing it out, only to come back in and buy it again. My manager said he felt bad but didn't want to enable this sort of behavior, and had a long chat with him about getting support. He still came in to buy other things, so I can only assume he didn't take it too bad, but I always wondered if he just started buying it from one of the other locations. Story 3. Well, there were a few over the years. One lady around 70 kept answering the door with an open robe and nothing else on. This one dude was weird and angry and would call up and just start in with, "You idiots, if you can get an order right one time." I don't think he knew 2 swear words, and we had to tell new people you can just hang up on him. But from what I heard, when he did get a delivery early on, he was nice and polite at the door. Some weird psychological stuff is happening there. The Zeppelin guys were the worst. This weird tall place had to go up 4 stories of rickety stairs, and every damn time they would wait until I was back down and then yelled down at me saying we got the order wrong. They were Zeppelin guys because they always had Led Zeppelin playing pretty loud. They wanted me and others to go all the way back up, take the wrong pizza back and bring a new one and get it for free. This worked a few times. Managers always wanted to give in to it, but then the drivers all sort of briefly unionized on this one at one point, and no one would deliver to them. So the manager finally caved in and told them not to order anymore. Stairway to aggravation, I guess. We had an old lady who got the exact same special every week delivered. She always paid mostly in change, and if there was a tip, it was 10 to 15 cents. She was an old school teacher with cancer and dementia, and was extremely particular about every single facet of the delivery, but we never blacklisted her because we were some of the only contacts she'd get every week. She didn't live very long after my first delivery to her, but I always made it a point not to get frustrated with her despite it being incredibly frustrating. I worked for a pizza place that had a regular customer order a sandwich or pizza with different instructions each time, and no matter how closely we followed them, there was always something wrong and we had to remake it. Never an issue with the remake. 100% just wanted free food because we didn't take back the wrong stuff. Except after a while we did. Just threw it out. but it made them stop after a while. He was nice and polite at the door. I used to work for a newspaper in the circulation department which dealt with printing and distribution. It was a small publication which staffed around 25 people, and I was one of the only 3 men there at the time. I'd also be one of the people handling customer complaints and redeliveries, although I wouldn't always take the phone call, which is where the story kicks in. A few subscribers would call in and yell at the women about how their paper was late or not there or wet or whatever, and then they'd hand me the note to go take them a new one, often letting me know they were rude. I'm a big, bearded, tattooed teddy bear of a man who can look intimidating if I need to be. And while I never menaced more than a heavy knock on the door, I always took pleasure in how small these big tough men who'd yell at a woman on the phone would act whenever I showed up. Story 4. I delivered pizza for 5 years of my life, and I don't have one crazy story. I got bit by a little dog on the ankle once. That's about the craziest thing. The weirdest thing that happened, though, this woman would call twice a week and order pasta to be delivered. This went on for years. Then one night I was taking her order, and I said, "And you'd like this delivered tonight, I'm assuming?" And she said, "No, I'd like it delivered tomorrow." We both laughed, and I said, "I'll see you in 20. I go back to make her order, and the phone rings again. It's her. She says, "I'm going to cancel my order. Do you know why?" And I was like, no. "Because you asked me if I wanted it delivered tonight. What the hell is that crap?" Then she hung up on me. She never ordered again. I still think about her sometimes. I would bet it's because the veil of anonymity was pierced. When people don't have a healthy relationship with food, they rely on the idea of service workers not recognizing them to mitigate their shame of what/how much they're eating. As soon as a service worker says something like, "your usual," or "back again," they freak out and think they're being judged, and then they switch up their routine. I worked in a Starbucks several years ago, and we had this regular every morning order the exact same drink. Of course, being Starbucks, we'd take his name and he would say, "Just write Milton," a fairly unusual name where I live. One day, we asked if that was his actual name, and he said no, but if we ever find out his actual name, he'd never come back. He was really friendly otherwise, and would just take his Americano and go about his day. Well, one day, one of the employees saw his real name on his debit card, and he usually made a point to hide it. The next day, he comes in and my coworker gleefully says, "Good morning, George." He's completely taken aback, says nothing, turns around and leaves. He didn't pay for nor take his order, and we never saw him again. I genuinely wonder what that was all about. You genuinely don't understand that it was an asshole move from your coworker? Every person wears identities and masks in different interactions in their lives. You wear one mask for your fiancé, another one for your colleagues, a different one for strangers, etc. Different people have different levels of how separated these identities are. For some people, they are drastically different, while for others, they can be more similar, but to one degree or another, everyone has this. This particular guy clearly preferred to be known as this random, superficially familiar stranger to these employees at Starbucks and wasn't going to let them move into a more friendly, more intimate circle, so to speak. Maybe he made up his Milton name the first time absolutely randomly without any thought put into it, or maybe he consciously prefers to hide his real self from strangers, to remain an anonymous stranger. Either way, it became a habit, a level of superficial familiarity that he was evidently comfortable with. Also a part of the ritual, so to speak. In this social interaction, I am Milton. And then your coworker barges in and violates his privacy like that, clearly surprising him and making him very uncomfortable. And especially after this Milton specifically stated that he would prefer to be this anonymous Milton, to the degree that he hides his real name and accidentally lets it slip this one time. The polite thing to do would to be ignore and forget this slip of disguise, not to shove it in Milton's face. Story 5. When I was in high school, I had a family order about $40 worth of food. I show up and she gives me $20. Then she said I must have dropped the other one. When I said that she did not, she asked me what I would do if I only got $20. I told her that I guess that she'd only get half the food. Then she threatened to call the manager and tell them I took the $20. It was my family's restaurant. I told her to go ahead and call my dad and that I would wait. She scowled and gave me the money. I told her not to call back. I had this one delivering chicken. Some fat scumbag gave me 2 10s for a total of $29.40. He says I dropped the other 10. I ask him where, since I'm holding the other 2. He claims I put it in my pocket. When I was young, I told him he was an idiot. Said he'd call my manager. I told him I was leaving with the food he was trying to steal. He didn't even call, but my manager blacklisted him with thief next to his address in the system. I was an assistant store manager, a Papa John's, and one shift was short on drivers, so I came in to deliver. This house I delivered misheard a special, so when I told them the price, they were confused. I don't remember the special, but it was to order X amount of pizzas and get a 2-liter for $1 or something like that. When I explained to them the special, she threw a fit and told her 7 to 10-year-old kid to go grab her phone because she was not going to let some pizza delivery boy tell her that she was wrong. Those were her exact words. I looked at her and said, I was the manager. She huffed and walked inside. A few minutes later, she sent the kid out and said they no longer wanted the pizza. I felt bad because the kid looked sad but got in the car and went back to the store. When I discussed it with the coworker, she said she told them I was the manager and there was a long pause, then they hung up. I fully planned to take the extra $1 off and just give them the 2 liters. I didn't really care, I just didn't want them to think that was the deal the next time they called. Story 6. We had a guy and 2 girls order separately, then grab the pizzas and run. The girls had picked the food up and left while the guy was paying. After 30 seconds, the guy bolted. It was a $100 order. My manager, who is a frequent gym goer, leaped at the counter and gave chase. The 2 girls had gotten into a car with the food, but when they saw my manager, they drove off, leaving the guy. My manager chased him 3 blocks and was gaining on the guy when the girls pulled up and the guy got into the car. Unfortunately, all 3 of them went to school with a kitchen hand at the store, so we had names, jobs, addresses, and Facebook accounts. We contacted them all on Facebook and got them to pay for the pizzas the next morning under threat of contacting the police. We also put them on the no delivery list. God damn, kids are stupid as hell. I did a similar asshat maneuver once when I was a broke teenager. Totally uncool, and I still feel like a dick about it, like 20 years later, lol. But hell, I don't have a time machine, so I guess I will just have to stew in my regret until I die. I saw something similar happen. In my old neighborhood, the house across the street from me was vacant. 2 kids, about 13 or 14, ordered a pizza and gave them the empty house's address. Their house was directly behind it, so they just snuck in the back door and answered the driver at the front. When he asked for payment, they told him their mom had the money and wanted to check the pizza first. He gave it to them and they closed the front door, snuck out the back, and walked right to their back door. He stood on the porch for a while before he started knocking on the neighbors' doors to ask about it. Dude looked shocked when I told him the house he delivered to was vacant. He just got robbed and was thankful all they took was a pizza and not his money or his life. Story 7. A Rottweiler broke the front window to attack me delivering their pies. The chain actually valued my health over profits enough to ban this house when the Roddy busted their living room window on a drop-off. They would be paying your workers' comp claims on the bite. They value your health insofar as it doesn't affect profit. I know Reddit swings young and thus mostly people who have never been in charge of others before, but do you realize that bosses are humans, right? If anybody I supervised was ever put in danger, my first thought is to protect them and screw the business. It sure as hell is not, them being mangled might cost a little more, I guess. This includes when I was running the business for over a decade. Plenty of crabby bosses out there, don't get me wrong. I had my share of them, but also a lot of people who actually do give a crap about those who work for them, and that includes up to the higher levels. Not everyone is Bezos laughing on a yacht while his workers are pissing in bottles and then go home to poverty. I lived in a place once that the postal carrier refused to deliver. I kept finding my mail at random places at nearby houses. I finally saw her once and asked what was up. She said the people before us had aggressive dogs, so she wouldn't deliver there. I pointed out there were no aggressive dogs there now, and the mailbox was installed on the outside of the fence, so there was zero chance of danger to her. She still refused. Story 8. We didn't put him on a no-serve list, but one guy answered the door naked, or rather with an open bathrobe. A few weeks later, he came to the door eating a can of cat food. My grandma was bipolar, but not functioning. She had electroshock in the 80s and was on a ton of meds, so getting through to her was hard. I lived with my grandparents in high school, and it became a running joke how many of my friends accidentally saw her boobs, cause she'd just be chilling with the robe wide open. Story 9. This was 7 years ago. Father offered his daughter up to me on Friday night, and then to another driver on Saturday night. Our GM wasn't controllable with talking to him, so using the internet, I found the wife's name and landline number, called from my cell phone, and asked for the wife. She came on the phone, introduced myself, and explained why I was calling. Never heard from him or her. I was about 21 and had my own computer repair shop and went to this old lady's house to fix her computer, and her mentally disabled daughter, who I'm guessing was 22, was there. So I fixed the computer and tried to get paid. The old woman offered up her daughter as payment. I ended up reporting the situation to the police, but I don't think anything came of it. Yo, I had the same crap happen to me when I used to work as an ADT install technician. I had this one install in Baltimore, and it was already one of the jankiest installs I had ever done. There were like 15 layers of wallpaper on the walls from people just relaying over the years without removing the old ones. So every time I drilled a hole, it would rip off surrounding sections of the paper and looked awful. Had to remove an outlet so that I could see behind the drywall and figure out where I could run cables through pre-existing gaps. And the electrical wiring had no plastic sheathing for at least 6 inches out the back of the outlet. So when I moved it out of the way, the wires twisted a bit, got too close, and caused a huge spark/short that flipped the breaker. Either way, stuff got weirder at one point when the father, who I was interacting with mostly, started checking me out and asking me where I was from and stuff like that. He says something about my genetics being good or whatever, which gave me an eyebrow raise moment before he left and came back with a picture of his daughter and started asking me what I thought of her, if I thought she was pretty, etc. Then starts straight up asking me if I wanted to screw her. I was like 20 or something at the time, and his daughter was a bit older than me, I think, so at least that wasn't a factor. But apparently it was some whole thing where she was trying to find a sperm donor, but they didn't want to do IVF or whatever, so the father was just scouting dudes who came by the house or something. Even told me about, don't worry about being a dad, and you can sign papers that it's just a dono, and all this crap. And even made some really inappropriate comments about how much fun I'd probably have or something to that effect. Also, keep in mind, at this point in my life, I've had 3 different girlfriends' dads all chase me down or threaten my life or both, just for being a dude and doing basic teenage stuff like sneaking out at night or whatever. Nothing actually harmful, just for basically being a guy who was seeing their daughters. So with these hostile experiences in mind, I'm just trying to figure out a way out of this, without the dude getting offended or murdering me. Eventually, his daughter actually came home while I was like 2/3 done with the installation and confirmed that what her dad was saying was true about the whole looking for a sperm donor thing. But she was definitely super embarrassed by how he was trying to propose all of this crap to me and got him to leave me alone about it immediately. And she definitely picked up quickly how uncomfortable that crap was making me, without it being like anything to do with how hot I thought she was. Was really grateful for that being put to rest. I had a guy ask me for gas money once when I was fueling up at a truck stop. Said he was trying to get his family home, and I certainly didn't have cash for every sob story that approached me at the truck stop. He came back a little while later after I parked and offered me his wife, and I said no. I was holding my mini sled because I couldn't get my trailer pins to release, so I could adjust my weight, and this guy offered me his daughter since I said no to his wife. I don't remember much after that, but he was arrested for attempting to sell sex, and I was on a short list of witnesses subject to subpoena, but he pled guilty and saved me for having to drop everything and show up in Tennessee for court. I absolutely despise people like this. Story 10. There are only a couple of people on that, and it's only because they complain about their delivery almost 100% of the time and demand free food. Even then, it takes a lot. I delivered for Pizza Hut for 5 years, and yes, it blew my mind how many times it would take to get them off that list. And I'd be delivering them 80% of the time, no tip guaranteed. It's funny, as a driver, you know the good and the bad addresses. It was truly a hustle. Plenty of wild experiences. I was once grabbing a takeout from our local pizza place and spotted a do not deliver list behind the counter next to the phone. Out of curiosity, I started looking through this. There were a couple of very specific residential addresses, fair, okay, a few very remote office buildings. I assume this was purely because of how far they were, but I may be wrong. A couple of known low-level motels that always had police activity in them, and my biggest surprise, a few decent chain hotels nearby like the Hampton Inn, Courtyard, those kinds of places, mostly catering to business travelers. I could understand everything up to that point, but that one left me puzzled to this day. I wonder, are there any chains that prohibit food delivery on their end and make it harder than it should be? Otherwise, I don't see a good reason why the pizza place would willingly cut off a place with a heavy concentration of professional travelers. I'll never understand how some people can complain about food service and then still order from the same restaurant. If you truly don't like it, then hear me out, just go somewhere else. Do they really think they're outsmarting businesses? It's just yucky and embarrassing behavior. Story 11. Back in 2021, my wife had to bite the bullet and deliver pizza between jobs. When she'd get home at 1 or 2 a.m., I'd get to hear about these people occasionally. Their no delivery bans were people, gender irrelevant, who opened the door naked repeatedly. Seems to be a common theme for young men and old women. People, mostly men, who would sex pester for phone numbers or follow back to the driver's car. No tippers who would order like $80 plus worth of pizza every week and not tip. Edgy teenagers who would fail miserably at prank calls. Their numbers would get banned for repeatedly calling in pizza for Ivana Humpalot. Parents would later call legitimately wanting pizza, just to be told they were banned because their idiot child didn't know Bart Simpson had already done every prank name in the book 25 years before the kid was even born. Interesting that you say young men and old women. I'm a physical therapist, and the only patients who seem to have trouble keeping clothing on are young men and old women. My sister works at an elder care facility. They have the best results putting the very elderly in basically gender-neutral outfits, but men are usually already wearing them by the time they get to that age. Comfortable, slightly oversized shirts, pants with elastic waist, comfortable underwear, if you can get them to wear it at all, and slip-on shoes. She's dealt with a lot of families who think it's undignified for grandma not to wear nice clothes any longer because she used to be such a sharp dresser, etc. But grandma's 79, has dementia, so if it's not comfortable, she's ripping it off. Story 12. I only know a couple of people that got banned. One guy was drunk and really rude to a driver, and we blacklisted him from delivery. He could still come and get the food, we just weren't going to deliver to him. He apologized, so we didn't make it a lifetime ban, just until the end of the year. The other person was banned and officially trespassed from the property. This person ordered food for herself and her family, her kid and grandkids. She was told it would be ready in 15 minutes, and it was ready in 13 minutes. She picked the food up 35 minutes after ordering it and 20 minutes after we told her to pick it up. Her family got pizza and she got a sandwich, which we put lettuce on after we pulled it from the oven. Due to the extra 20 minutes that it sat on the warmer, the lettuce wilted a bit as it does when it gets warm. The lady called the store screaming and demanding the manager. The assistant manager was in, so he took the call and could not get a word in edgewise. He eventually hung up the phone on her because all she was doing was screaming. The store manager came out of the office. He was working on the schedule to find out what just happened, as he could see him slam the phone down in anger. While this is going on, a crazy lady makes a complaint about being given rotten lettuce in her sandwich by a corporation. Obviously, they get the RM to find out what the heck is going on. The RM calls the store and asks for the store manager. RM asks for two things: a picture of a freshly made sandwich and a picture of that same sandwich 30 minutes later after it had been on the warmer. We start this process, get a picture, and set it on the warmer. While that is warming up, the crazy lady comes back to the store and starts screaming at everyone. The assistant manager is still at the front of the store, and the store manager is getting the email ready for the pictures to be sent. This crazy witch then throws her sandwich at the assistant manager, hitting him right in the face. It was still wrapped, so no mess, and no damage to him at all, and I'm pretty proud he didn't jump the counter and choke her to death. He had taken her abuse for nearly 30 minutes with the phone, plus in person screaming. She peeled out of the parking lot right after. The cops were called, and her family showed up while the cops were there. They apologized and said that she was on some new medication and it was a side effect. We said that it was quite unfortunate to hear. She is never allowed to order from us again. We are not delivering to your address, and the police officer will hand you a copy of the order of trespass against her for her own files. Then there was the time someone knocked over a 2-liter and landed on its cap, causing it to break open and rocket directly into one of my coworkers' nuts. He didn't think that was funny. Everyone else disagreed with him. Man, I've had a couple of medications do that to me. The first BP med I was on turned me into a raging a-hole for days before I figured out what it was. I didn't realize something was wrong until someone cut me off right before a stoplight, and I nearly pushed them into oncoming traffic, so they would die. Fortunately, my higher reasoning kicked in and I realized something was wrong, but every new medication I take for anything, I have to make sure it doesn't make me go crazy. I had an ADHD medication do the same thing once, but I was prepared and just stayed in a dark room for a few hours and stopped taking it. I feel so much less alone. Thank you all for sharing your stories. As someone with depression who's tried several different meds, I definitely understand the meds making you act out deal. But at the same time, any competent doctor is going to make you aware of that. Hey, this med has some hard startup effects, so take it easy, start on a weekend, etc. If you can't tolerate it, stop and call me ASAP. Sounds like she didn't take the advice, assuming it was a given. I had a partner with schizoaffective disorder, and some medications made her seem like a completely different person. That being said, it's still 100% still on you to understand what the medication is doing to you and to control yourself. I get that some meds make you not yourself, but you should be taking what I call constant inventory of yourself. How you're feeling mentally, physically, emotionally, etc. What your side effects are, and if they're getting better or worse. And have an idea of if the meds are helping or not in general. You don't get to throw out "it's my meds" as an excuse for your inability to control yourself. The exception is for those illnesses/disorders where you literally just can't control it. But from what I've seen, usually people who have those also have a caregiver. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.